Hello and welcome, class of 2024, to another session of Love Wellesley's orientation. Today, we will be talking about what constitutes loving, healthy relationships and how to move beyond just violence prevention and strive to thrive in all of our relationships. My name is Allie Weinberg, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the director of the Office of Student Wellness on campus. In our office, we work to support your holistic wellness, from physical, emotional, spiritual well-being, and all that's in between. We understand that to thrive academically, we must work to balance all parts of our dynamic, wonderful selves. So I'd like you to take a moment and reflect on what comes to mind when you hear the word self-care. Oftentimes, it includes images of soaking in a bubble bath and sipping on a bubble tea, which are two of my favorite things, but those are more along the lines of self-soothing, ways of taking care or calming ourselves in the moment, whereas self-care is really the preventative, ongoing measures we engage in to promote growth and ensure we are taking care of ourselves holistically. This means managing our finances responsibly, having creative outlets, journaling or reflection, sleep hygiene, regular physical or mental health appointments, nourishing and loving nutrition and activity, and finally, healthy relationships, which we'll be focusing on today. And while we often talk about romantic or sexual relationships, I also want to encourage you to think about how this relates to friends, family, and cultivating healthy relationships with ourselves. In order to talk about holistic wellness, it's important to acknowledge holistic perspectives and diversity. You are all coming together for the first time this week, bringing with you lived experiences, identities, and beliefs. We believe that to be stronger together, we must embrace our diversity and difference. The following are just some of types of differences that may shape our relationships: gender and sexuality, race and ethnicity, physical abilities, mental health, neurodiversity, religious, spiritual, or personal beliefs, thinking or communication styles, personal life experiences, differences in education around sex, consent, and health, and how this impacts our current or future relationships, and many more. We'll be discussing how our families, communities, education, and cultures all influence our beliefs around relationships and sexual health later on. But I encourage you to keep this in mind and think about how the different influences throughout your life have shaped your understandings of the topics we will be exploring today. The different influences and experiences we've all had shape the lens through which we view the world. However, we now come together as a new community, living, working, and learning with one another. This is why we ask you to complete the e-checkup and not any more trainings, so that together as a community, we can have shared understandings and values around some of these important topics, around substance use and healthy relationships, and so that we can all move forward in our new community with a shared understanding of values and norms. So today, we're going to explore a range of different topics related to healthy relationships. But before we get started, I just want to name that some of the content in this presentation will examine elements of unhealthy relationships. Some of what we discuss may look familiar to you from your own experiences or from an experience you've seen a loved one navigate. Some of this may feel uncomfortable, so I encourage you to balance your learning with taking care of yourself. I encourage you to do what you need to take care of yourself by getting a drink of water, going to the bathroom, but I hope you'll rejoin to continue learning when you are ready. There will also be information about resources available to you on campus should anything in this presentation come up for you that you would like to explore further with professional support. So today, we will touch on 4 main topics: sexual misconduct prevention and what we mean by this. Our Title IX Director, Kate Epitham, will be going into this in much more detail, so be on the lookout for her presentation too. We will then discuss how to build and maintain healthy relationships, then move into healthy sexuality, and finally, what you can do to play a role in building a healthier and happier Wesleyan world more largely. So why is this important? Why do we have a presentation dedicated to this at all? Well, we believe that our role as individuals living in community with one another is not merely to live in absence of violence, but to create a world in which we can learn from one another, enjoy one another, and grow with one another. To be successful, we have to do more than just prevent sexual violence. We have to rewrite the scripts and envision what thriving, healthy relationships and healthy sexuality look like for each of us, and they do look differently for each of us. So a big part of this is self-reflection and self-growth. I want you to know that you don't have to have all the answers right away. A little louder for the people in the back. You don't have to have all the answers right away. That's the beauty of life. Learning and then reflecting, growing, rinse and repeat. All of what we discussed today is really meant to be the beginning of a much longer conversation. We just want to encourage you to begin thinking about these things if you haven't already. And then know where to get information and help if you or someone else ever needs it. So this is where Kate's information in Title IX, supports and resources are all housed. Again, Kate will be discussing much more of this in detail, but there are a few things I'd like to highlight. Our college policies about sexual misconduct are rooted in conducting sexual interactions with honesty, integrity, and respect, wherein students are expected to obtain consent for any sexual interaction, communicate effectively with sexual partners and clearly understand their partner's wishes. Students are expected to be educated, empowered, and engaged in preventing sexual misconduct and responding to it effectively. And finally, students are expected to report sexual misconduct, use support services, and encourage others to do the same. I underscore these points to highlight Wellesley's commitment to creating an environment where all community members can thrive in safe and healthy ways. So let's dive into how we do that. One of the core tenets of this is that certainly eliminating sexual misconduct is incredibly important. But this is also the bare minimum, and we can do better than the minimum. Quote, don't commit sexual misconduct is really a low bar for us. The point of relationships, sexual and otherwise, is to enjoy them and to enrich your life. Wellesley College uses an affirmative consent model. This means that it's a yes means yes model, not no means no, or silence is yes model. So it's helpful to think about this in terms of the Fry's model, where sex is freely given, meaning that consenting is a choice you make without pressure, manipulation, or under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Consent is reversible. Anyone can change their mind about what they feel like doing at any time, even if you've done it before, even if you're in a relationship, and even if you're both naked in bed in the middle of it, you can change your mind. Consent is informed. You can only consent to something if you have the full story. For example, if someone says they'll use a condom and then they don't, there isn't full consent. Consent is enthusiastic. When it comes to sex, you should only do stuff you want to do, not things that you feel like you're expected to do. And finally, consent is specific. Saying yes to one thing, like going to the bedroom to make out, does not mean that you've said yes to other things, like having sex. So together, this gives us the Fry's model. So who cannot give consent? Not everyone in every situation is able to give consent. And as our first letter in the Fry's notes, it has to be freely given. This means that someone who is incapacitated by alcohol or other drugs, is asleep, is under 16, has been coerced, meaning that through different positions of power or influence, or they can't understand the act or consequences, this person could not give consent. So now that we've established that bare minimum of what it looks like to eliminate sexual misconduct, what does it mean to build healthy, thriving relationships? The first thing that's important to note is that there isn't one way to have a healthy relationship. This entirely depends on partners' individual needs, communication styles, boundaries, and desires. It's hard to give a black and white definition of a healthy relationship, but we certainly can mention specific tips or skills that can contribute to someone deciding on what it looks like for themselves. And again, we're really here for the self-reflection and that growth glow up. So one of the important things to know is that relationship exists on a spectrum, ranging from healthy, unhealthy, to abusive. Unhealthy behavior is just what it sounds like. Behaviors in a relationship that are hurtful to the people involved or don't work to foster a prosperous relationship. Abusive relationships are a bit more complex. Abusive relationships exploit the vulnerabilities of certain people involved in the relationship for the benefit of others. They happen in a cycle of unhealthy patterns. It's important to understand that relationships happen on a spectrum. Relationships that have unhealthy behaviors aren't automatically abusive. Relationships, like people, can be a mix of good and not so good qualities, and there's often room for positive change. No one is perfect, and no relationship is perfect, but we should always be striving to foster positive growth amongst individuals. So with all of this, I'd like you to consider, what does a healthy relationship look like to you? What are your relationship goals? This is the Healthy Relationships or Equality Wheel, and it outlines some relationship goals we should all strive for, elements that make up an equitable and healthy relationship. These elements are not and should not just be limited to romantic or sexual relationships, but this is applicable to all different relationships in our lives. Some examples of this are admitting when you're wrong, being able to express your feelings or opinions without fear, knowing that it's okay to disagree, respecting each other's boundaries and privacy, not pressuring one another, asking before acting, that's that consent, willingness to compromise, making decisions together, doing things for one another, giving as much as you receive, listening to one another, offering encouragement, celebrating and respecting differences, different interests, and different friend groups. And finally, healthy boundary setting, where healthy boundaries are how we maintain self-esteem, communication, and balance and power dynamics in the relationships in our lives. So as we discussed, there are many types of relationships and ways of being in a relationship, and they can move along that spectrum. Sometimes unhealthy relationships can escalate to interpersonal violence. Interpersonal violence is a combination of a number of different tactics and behaviors of abuse that are used to maintain power and control. A lot of these behaviors may feel subtle and even normal, often unrecognizable until you look at the wheel in this way. Perhaps it's making it so that you're so busy together that you realize you're starting to become isolated from family and friends. Perhaps it's blaming or name-calling when you make simple mistakes. Many of these things can be happening at any one time, all as a way to enforce power within the relationship. These elements can show up in romantic, sexual, platonic, or familial relationships. We use this wheel as a tool to help show individuals that you're not alone if you're experiencing any of these behaviors, or if you find yourself engaging in these behaviors and you want to make a change. Another reason we share this tool is that you may, while living on a college campus, be surrounded by others who experience this, and you may witness some of these behaviors in someone you know or care about and want to know what you can do to help. So what can we do to make a change? Connecting to a trusted professional to discuss your experiences can be an empowering and helpful experience for many folks. We have 3 confidential resources on campus should you want to talk with someone confidentially about your experiences. The Stone Counseling Center, Health Services, and Office for Religious and Spiritual Life do not share identifiable information without your permission, unless sharing is required to address an imminent safety risk or if you are a minor. For other support, we have these resources, but please note that they are not confidential. Sexual Assault Awareness for Everyone is one of our peer health groups on campus that provides peer education and support to the Wellesley community through crisis intervention and the prevention of violence and sexual assault. Of course, we have the incredible Kate Upetham in our Title IX office. And finally, if you're looking to learn more online, please check out loveisrespect.org for much more information and resources. So now that we've explored a bit about what healthy relationships look like, we want to discuss healthy sexuality. What do we mean by the term healthy sexuality? The definition from the World Health Organization serves our community well. Sexual health is a state of physical, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences free of coercion, discrimination, and violence. Healthy sexuality involves your attitudes and feelings, physical and emotional needs, sexual needs and desires throughout your lifetime, pleasure and fulfillment, self-image and respect. And healthy sexuality has to do with communicating, accepting, and giving love and affection, cultural and religious influences, and expressing intimacy and feeling like you belong. Sexual health means being able to comfortably discuss your feelings and values, initiate sex, say no to sex, or abstain from sex altogether, enjoy sexual expression, arousal, and orgasm without fear, guilt, or shame, and exercise your sexual rights, which includes feeling safe and in control of your body, understanding and expressing your feelings, choosing how you will express your sexuality with respect for yourself and others, and choosing whether you will be in a relationship and the kind of relationship it will be. As I alluded to at the beginning of this, how we understand our relationships, sexuality, and sexual health is shaped by so many factors. Sometimes these influences are in alignment, and sometimes we have to reconcile differences. How we feel about ourselves and our sexuality informs what we choose to do and not do. And we know a lot about what Wellesley College students choose to do or not do because we collect data on all sorts of health behaviors here. Every 2 years, we collect data on campus for the National College Health Association survey, a national survey that looks at a wide range of health behaviors in college students. We just collected data in March and we'll be reviewing it soon, so stay tuned. In the meantime, I want to share our most recent data from before this, in the spring of 2018. We had 893 Wellesley students participate, which is about a 43% response rate. Super awesome. Our Wellesley students love a good survey. So when it comes to sexual intercourse, what we know is that about half of people reporting having had intercourse and about half haven't, for both oral and vaginal intercourse. We know that this is a very brief snapshot and doesn't fully encompass all of our community's sexual experiences, bodies, or sexualities. However, we note this to show that whatever your choices are, you're not the only one making that choice. The NCHA data also asks students how they describe their sexual orientation or how they identify themselves, and the variety is quite wide. 49% report identifying as heterosexual, while 51% said asexual, queer, bisexual, lesbian, same-gender loving, gay, something else, pansexual, or questioning. We also know that identities evolve, and for students who are away at college for the first time, this may be the first time that they're able to have agency or more flexibility in their expression, their relationships, their health, and their behaviors. So remember what we've been saying throughout this presentation? Oh yes, that beautiful self-reflection. Sometimes you don't have it all figured out right away, and that's totally cool. Being in a supportive environment where you can learn more about others and yourself is really what we're aiming for. As we grow throughout our lives, so does the process of our self-reflection and identities. So how do we continue the process of developing our own individual sense of sexual health? We consider the influences. We consider what is normal in our community. We decide what matters to us and create our boundaries from there. So the following are just a few things for you to reflect on and think about as they relate to your identity. Again, this is all a continuous process throughout all of our lives. Our boundaries, feelings, values, deal breakers, they change and they evolve. And having friends, partners, and trusted others who affirm our boundaries is incredibly important to feel safe and supported. All right, so now that we're armed with some info about what makes a relationship thrive, how does that translate into what steps I can take to make a change? We all encounter situations in which our values as individuals and a community are called into question. We hope that you will take part in the responsibility of creating a safe and healthy community here at Wellesley. During your time at Wellesley, or throughout life, you may be faced with the choice to intervene and help stop a potentially dangerous or harmful situation, perhaps intervening when someone is being harassed or preventing sexual misconduct from occurring. Bystander intervention is about intervening in a safe way when we see a risky situation unfolding to prevent and de-escalate potentially violent incidents. As individuals in the community, we have a shared responsibility and we can all play a role. We want to reiterate your own safety in this. Different people are situated differently, and so we want to provide positive intervention strategies that may be helpful to you, but only if you deem that intervening will be safe. So how do I intervene? It depends on the situation. There are numerous strategies to intervene safely in a situation. The first to consider is being direct. If you feel comfortable, step in when you witness inappropriate behavior and directly ask those involved, what's going on here? Or pull the person you're concerned about to the side and say, may I speak to you in private? Or are you feeling okay in this situation? Can I help at all? The next strategy to consider is delegate. Notify someone else to a questionable situation. This could be campus police, a faculty or staff member, a resident assistant, or the host of a party. Another one to consider is distract. Divert an alleged offender's attention by drawing their attention elsewhere. For instance, say to them, hey, that person over there looks familiar. I can't remember their name. Do you mind going and ask? When the offender looks away, ask the person you're concerned about to the side and out of the area. Or again, offer the person you're concerned about a way out of the situation by saying, hey, can you help me? My ride left and I need someone to go home with, and then walk out together to a safer environment. And finally, consider delaying. Postpone a situation by gathering additional information if you're not sure whether to intervene. Ask the person you're concerned about if there's anything you can do to help. For instance, you may ask, are you okay? Or is there anything I can do to help you with? If you're looking for more ways to make change, we encourage you to get involved. Become a certified peer health educator on campus and join both or either SAFE, our Sexual Assault Awareness for Everyone group, or the Sexual Health Educators, two incredibly rad student groups on campus that work hand in hand with the Office of Student Wellness to promote sexual health and wellness. As I mentioned earlier, there's no one way to capture everything in a short presentation, but I hope that this has sparked some thoughts for you. It's got you thinking about some things about yourself, your relationships, and some of the goals you'd like to set for living healthier and happier. And please know, you're not alone in this journey, and there is strength in community. Be sure to check out the Office of Student Wellness's website and social media to stay up to date and in the know about our programs and initiatives. Remember, Kate Upetham in Title IX has a lot of different resources and support should you ever need to connect. And if you want to get involved, you should definitely consider joining SAFE or the SHEs. And finally, if you'd like to connect with a professional, confidential resource on campus, please reach out to Stone Counseling Center, Health Services, or the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life. Thank you so much for taking part in this training. I hope it's been helpful to you in thinking, reflecting, and learning more about yourself and your relationships. I look forward to continuing to support your learning and growth. And once again, welcome to Wellesley and be well.